At this juncture, I'd like us to go straight and invite our own Barbara Andor, who is a research associate at CSENR. I don't always want to pronounce it, to give us a presentation, and then after that, we'll have a few comments, and then we'll launch into the discussion proper. So Barbara, please take up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bento, and thank you, Rim, for that great presentation. One thing that I would like to add to the presentation, one thing that I think is very useful for us to think through, is the state of the financial health of our utilities, power utilities in Africa in general. Because most of the solutions that we are looking at concerning renewables have to do with utility scale solar, utility scale wind. All these are intended to be carried by the grid. But the grids as we have them now are not as efficient as we would like them. We still have capacity challenges, we still have efficiency challenges. And if we are looking to put all that power that we are generating from renewable energies onto the same grid, we will not be able to make the quick gains within the time frame we are looking at. If you look at the Renewable Energy Master Plan, for example, for Ghana, that is, there are very exciting targets in there. I think one of the targets is that we have to attain 4,000 megawatts renewable energy in our total electricity generation mix by 2020. And we're in 2018, we have just 2 years to go, and we are still not even halfway to achieving that target. So I think it must be a critical thing considered in our discussions. Another thing that I would like to add is that there's a need to achieve a balance in looking at the deployment of renewable energy, because if we are looking at achieving quick gains, while we are dealing with the power sector inefficiencies or the overall financial health of our power utilities, we also need to look at ways or means by which we can make very quick gains within the short term. And I know that some of the ways are already being deployed. For instance, the proliferation of solar home systems. We also look at micro and mini grids and several other off-grid systems. However, there are challenges there as well that need to be sorted out, that need to be critically looked at. For instance, if we take the solar home systems, we realize that the components that come with, for instance, an inverter, a solar panel, looking at solar energy alone, sometimes the upfront costs of those investments are a bit inhibitive when you look at our average households in Ghana. Those are things that we need to look at so that we achieve a very accurate balance. While we are working to sustain our power utilities, we need to work at the same time to be able to make quick gains with off-grid systems. We look at other initiatives that are to help facilitate the proliferation of renewable energies. We look at the feed-in tariffs, auctioneering, net metering, amongst others. We realize that in Ghana, for instance, as an example, we had a Renewable Energy Act and everything that comes with it in 2011, but it wasn't until 2013 that we could effectively even start implementing our feed-in tariffs. And even so, we haven't had it easy. So in formulating these policies, it will be useful to go deeper and look into other models. Perhaps there are things that we can tweak. Perhaps there are other examples. For instance, in South Africa, there's an auction system that is working well. South Africa, as was seen from the presentation, is one of the countries in Africa where energy access has been superb. And I think it will be useful to learn from countries like South Africa. In order not to take away all the points, I think I'll stop here so that we can have a fruitful discussion.
Right, okay. Thank you very much, Barbara. Like was said, we're expecting Mr. Wisdom Ahiata Kutogobo, the Director of Renewable and Alternatives from the Ministry of Energy, and Mr. Dr. Alfred Ofosua-Hinkra, who is Executive Director at Energy Commission. My information is that they are stuck outside the country as we speak. I'm hoping they'll manage to get their way in, but it doesn't look like they'll make it. So fortunately, we have a bit of time, and I'd like us to use that to beat up a few of the issues. I'd like to start by putting the matter in perspective. So this is about energy. It's specifically about renewable energy, but to set the ball rolling, I don't think we must be too focused on renewable energy for its sake. There is an argument to be made for renewable energy for its sake. But I'd like us to take it first from the broad view of energy. The reason being that energy is crucial to life. All modern life is based on energy availability. So I don't have time to go into the history of mankind, but if you go back 200 years ago, and you look at how fast we've developed in the last 200 years, 2 centuries of human being existence, you will find out that the availability of energy is directly correlated with the development of mankind. Indeed, today it's difficult for people to appreciate the fact that a few centuries back, it was impossible to make some of the journeys that we make today. You could not travel too far. You could not do international trade. It was extremely difficult even if you tried, simply because we did not have the energy systems to power the transportation systems we have today. So energy by itself is a major issue. It is a well-established fact that energy availability and consumption is an indicator of development. So if you look across the world, countries that have a lot of energy and use a lot of energy are the most developed. It is also established that it is not just an indicator, but it is an enabler. In other words, the use of energy actually makes you more developed. That's the first problem we need to deal with, because you hear about how people want to limit the use of energy in the environmental, argument, which is valid. You don't want to waste energy, but you do want to have people using more energy, because the alternative is not acceptable. Using is not the same as wasting. To use it, however, it must be available. So every country must find a way to develop energy resources and make it available to its people to use, because that is what will push them into development. So the first thing is, how do we generate more energy, and how do we make it more available to our people? Then you come to the renewable issue. So we've been used to the fossil fuel and other sources of energy. But now there is a major push for many reasons that maybe we'll go into during the question and answer time. But again, I emphasize that the focus here is about having energy and using it. The renewable question comes in because we know the constraints with the traditional sources of energy, fossil fuels and sources like hydro. You need a river, it has to be in a certain geological arrangement, and then the investment to put in a dam, and then to evacuate the power to the places where it's needed. And then you take fossil fuel, you need to go down, drill it, take it out, refine it, transport it, and the things that it comes with. And we are realizing that there is this option called renewables, which in the past 30 years have become a major source. Germany, which is one of the most developed countries in the world, has instituted a program called Energy Wende. And in their Energy Wende program, they intend to transit the whole of Germany onto renewable energy in the next 30 years. They started some time back. They are actually on their course. They are meeting some of their targets. Of course, they are sleeping on some of them, but it's amazing how far they've gone. They intend to transit the whole Germany, one of the most energy dense countries in the world, to renewables, and on paper, it can work. So the question is, what are we doing with ourselves? Here's the African irony. And when it comes to the time to discuss it, I'll continue to tell you that, give me the solutions, because I'm going to give you all the problems. The African irony is this: Africa is energy rich naturally, but energy poor in terms of production and utilization. Naturally, Africa has millions of barrels of oil. It's there. But Africa is among the least users of even fossil fuels. Naturally, Africa has maybe the most sunshine of all the continents. But we have very little solar power usage. Naturally, Africa is wind-swept all over. But we use very little wind energy. So Africa is naturally energy rich, but in terms of production and usage, very poor. Indeed, Belgium, which is a small country in Europe of about 11 million people, Belgium, and for us in Ghana, Belgium is roughly the size of Ashanti region. The land size of about Ashanti region. And they are just about the population of Cape Coast, Accra, and Volta region. Oh, no, I think it's more than that, because Accra is 5 thereabouts. So basically, 11 million people. Accra is 5 million thereabouts. They produce in Belgium alone as much energy as the whole of Africa. As the whole of Africa. So I'm just trying to put things in perspective. And it's not really to shame us. I'm simply trying to paint a picture of where we are and therefore get a sense of what the gap is and therefore what we need to do. Okay. Now, with all that in mind, the question is, can it be done? Can it be done? And I think some of the answers are in the presentations you made. The problem is that, can it be done? The first easy source of energy will be the fossil fuels, will be the normal sources like hydro, which we have known for many years. I just want to take a bit of time and paint the picture of why those present a problem. Fossil fuels are extremely expensive to get out of the ground and to make useful. That is one. Expensive in cash terms and expensive in environmental and other terms. Then when you have gotten them out, they are expensive to manage. You need tank farms, you need tankers, you need pipelines, very expensive infrastructure to manage. And when you have used them, they also cause pollution. So we know of the ozone layer and all the problems that these things are costing us. So fossil fuels are a solution that will cost you a lot, even if you can manage to get them out and to use them. We don't have a choice, we have to continue to use them. In Ghana today, there's a major problem. The problem is our 200 barrels of oil produced every day and what we are doing with the revenue. We have suffered the same problem I've just enumerated. It cost us over $4 billion to get the oil out of the ground. And to raise the money to get it done, we had to more or less sign off basically the whole resource. We are getting just about 10% of it. Many people don't like that. But the fact is, what was the choice? Did we have a choice? Did we have over $4 billion to develop our oil fields? And were we supposed to wait till we saved $4 billion to develop the oil fields? We can have that argument till the chickens come home to roost. But that is why we have this problem here. So immediately somebody will say, well, let's use hydro. We know Akosombo. It's helped us all these years and it's good. Here are some facts about hydro. Hydro is also extremely expensive to harness. A dam will cost you billions. That's one. But the biggest expense of hydro is not in the cost of the dam. If you take Akosombo, the land size alone that Akosombo took off Ghana, the land size, the land that we lost, if you calculate the value of that land, you will see the real value of hydro. Then the diseases that were visited on this country became endemic around the Volta Lake area simply because we had dammed the lake, the river, and it had now become a lake. The cost in terms of human lives, the cost in terms of disease burden, the cost in terms of Medicare and all those other things, most of which we've neglected. We have not factored into that whole equation. Now, when you finish factoring all those, the environmental and other costs, you will come to realize that hydro is not as cheap as people say it is. When you get time, Google Banqiao. Banqiao is a Chinese word, B-A-N-Q-U-I-A-O. B-A-N-Q-U-I-A-O. Banqiao Dam. The story of Banqiao Dam is that it broke, and within the space of 24 hours, over 100,000 people died. Banqiao Dam broke. It was a hydro dam. And when it broke, within the space of 24 hours, over 100,000 people died. Subsequently, even more people died. When Chernobyl, the nuclear power plant in Russia, blew up, just about 10,000 people died. I am giving you some sort of perspective on the real cost of energy sources. We all don't like nuclear energy. We think it's too dangerous. The worst nuclear accident in the world cost just about 10,000 lives. Banqiao Dam cost over 100,000 lives. So when you really compare, and these are some of the things that research will show you, which ordinarily your emotions will not connect to. So in short, there is no cheap option. That brings us to the issue of, so can we really do this renewable thing? Can we do the solar? Can we do the wind? Can we do the tidal wave thing? You know, can we do biogas? Can we do biomass? These are the sources of renewable energy. And like Barbara mentioned, immediately you get a sense that if you take solar, for instance, the value chain includes solar panels. You have to have aluminum frames. You have to have technicians to fix it. You need a battery and all those things, and people run away from it. I'd like to conclude and set the ball rolling by saying that I believe it can be done. I believe what we need to do is to do the intellectual heavy lifting. Our energy experts, our engineers, and others involved in this sector can actually put together a plan that helps us to roll out real energy systems that solve real problems, whether they are renewable or not. But indeed, I hold the proposition that the renewable sources, much as they are not the answer to everything, may be the ones that can give us fast solutions and durable solutions. And in conclusion, recently, there was a proving of this concept by Tesla's Elon Musk. So they had a problem in Australia. A lot of their grid was blown off. And by some stroke of luck or accident, one of Tesla's engineers said that, well, they can solve that problem. And on Twitter, there was a challenge. A very serious person in Australia challenged Tesla and said, if you can solve the problem, we are going to pay you X million in terms of, remuneration. And Elon Musk actually got into the conversation and said that they will solve the problem in 100 days. And if they don't solve the problem in 100 days, all that installation is for free. And it costs tens of millions of dollars. Now, reason why I'm bringing this here is that sometimes when you look at the problem, especially in these parts of the world, we think it's impossible. Here is a competition between two boys. And I call them boys because it was like a boys' competition on Twitter. And one of them committed to build the biggest battery farm and solar-powered system the world has ever seen. It's not been done before. He committed to do it in 100 days, or it will be free. And this gentleman took him on and said, you are on. Long story short, in 100 days, Tesla built the biggest battery farm in the world. Google it, you'll see it. So it is possible. If people can bet on Twitter and deliver something like this in 3 months, then we don't have a choice allowing our people to die in darkness and disease if Africa is naturally energy rich. But indeed, in production of energy and usage, we are so poor. So on this note, I'd like to give it back to Barbara, who is the MC, and to set the ball rolling in terms of the discussion on how we can deal with these real problems that we face. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bento. I don't know if Rem would like to respond to Mr. Bento's comment.
Maybe I'll add a few words regarding, because I've spoken more generally on Africa. Maybe I'll add a few words on Morocco and what it has done so far to tackle also this issue. So Morocco depends also heavily on fossil fuels in its energy use. But lately, with the rise of renewable, it has taken a new place, and the country has adopted a new strategy to foster the use of the renewable energy. One of the main objectives of Morocco is to bring the share of renewables to 52% by 2050, divided as follows: 14% for hydro, 14% for solar, and 14% for wind. To be able to achieve that, it has established an adequate framework to support this objective by the creation, for instance, of the Moroccan Agency for Solar Energy, which is called MASEN, to overview projects related to the renewable energy, especially in power generation. But it has also adopted new laws to support this energy transition. Like, for instance, there is a law that has been passed that allows big companies to sell the excess of auto-produced or auto-generated electricity. So I can speak more about the specific projects that Morocco has done in the discussions, if you like, and allow time for questions and answers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Bento asked a very important question, that can it be done? Can Africa be moved to producing more energy and utilizing more energy, especially in respect of renewable energy? I believe that it can be done, but the real question is whether we are ready, we are willing and able to do what it takes to actually drive us there. Over the years, I think from 2000, we've had 65% increase in renewable energies across the continent, and it has taken a concerted effort on the part of all stakeholders. And given growth in energy demand, given population growth, given how we are balancing that with our energy supply, it will take some time. However, I believe that we'll be able to see the effects in due course. I think that we can open up for question and answer session now. So if anybody has any questions, please.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Bernard, and I'm a government and political affairs analyst for Talugana Limited. I think it has been a wonderful presentation so far, but I'm a bit confused because it seems like we are not providing a comprehensive knowledge around renewable energy, because during the presentation by Rim from OCP, she made mention that hydro is 6% and then renewable energy, she gave a percentage to it. But we all know that renewable energy includes hydro, because, for example, when we want to harness the power of water, it's renewable. And I have a friend who is conducting research, and according to the research she has done so far, Ankobra River alone can give us around 330 to 800 kilowatt of power. And we are talking about building a local industry, especially with the government's agenda. And so I think that if you're looking at in terms of every country and where it want to go to in terms of renewable energy, you should consider the country's resources and strength. And Mr. Benton makes the argument about land size and the fact that hydro is expensive. I bet to differ a bit. And that granted, even if you have land in excess, what stops us from using it to provide hydro? Because we need them. What are we using the land for? Of course, Galamsey is there destroying them. And so I think that it is important to invest in. And most of these renewable energies that you are mentioning, for example, solar, you can say that it's really more expensive than going hydro. And we all here can agree that hydro is very cheap and we cannot underestimate it. So I think that we should have that clear perspective about renewable energy and consider the fact that hydro is part of it and it's cheaper. And as a country like Ghana, whereby we have rivers and we are destroying it, and we have land in excess, we should be able to harness it and produce the power that we need in order to generate the local industry that we need. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Noted. will address them. So the gentleman in the middle. And if anybody has perspective on any of the questions, I think you can also chip in.
Thank you very much. My name is Ejenim Boating. I think it would have been good from Biotherm Energy.
Okay.
It would have been good if we had reps from Ministry of Energy and then Energy Commission also, because I think in the presentation, our lady gave an overview of what the picture looks like in Africa. And if you say that in Africa we're electrified about 65%, it can paint a gloomy picture. But when you come down to Ghana here, the Ministry of Energy figure says that we're 98% electrified. And then when it comes to energy generation, the generators will tell you that we have an overcapacity in generation. So if this is our situation, in reality, what is our motivation for going solar? For going renewable? Thank you.
Mr. Benson, do you want to take a third question?
I think a third one. There was a gentleman just behind you.
Oh, behind me? Is it this hand?
Yeah.
Right. Well, my name is Amin Karimu from University of Ghana Business School. Basically an energy economist. So I'll talk about it in the market perspective. Right. If you want to scale renewable, obviously we need the price signals to encourage private sector to be part of it. Government generally cannot do everything, obviously, because renewables are quite expensive to start with. The initial cost of investment is quite huge, and therefore, if you want a good playing field to get people to be part of it, then you need to have the pricing of electricity to be right. And therefore, these regulators and interference in the electricity price will be a serious hindrance if you really want to promote renewables. That's the first thing. Now, coming back to hydro, I agree that hydro is quite expensive to develop, but there are different types of hydro. It depends on whether you are going to the mini hydro or you are going to the heavy, large plant hydro. If you go to Sweden, where mostly the hydro are the mini hydro dams, they have several of them, which is very competitive in terms of cost in producing or establishing the hydro dams. In those cases, you don't need to destroy that much land, and therefore the cost benefits analysis of that will be that you should actually come with an hydro relative to other non-renewable sources, such as oil and coal and gas.
Right. Right. Thank you very much. So our panelists will handle the questions.
I have more also comments rather than answer. For the first comment, yes, you are right. Hydro is part of renewable, and but sometimes when we look at data or when we want to extract data, it is separated from the renewable energy numbers. For example, in Morocco, hydro is already well developed, whereas solar and wind is not. That's why they do this distinction to give a better idea. Also, to the gentleman there, yes, of course, the presentation was aimed to give a more macro overview of Africa. Indeed, there will be differences when we look at specific countries. The number given were more also Africa average. I'm sure, as you mentioned, Ghana is doing very well in access to energy, and so as Morocco. So it is. Since Africa is a very big continent and very fragmented continent, it's very difficult to give, very specific numbers regarding very specific countries. But I agree with you, and you are right. Okay, so maybe I'll give.
Okay, so I'd like to speak to the question about the motivation for going renewable or for increasing renewable energy in the general generation mix for Ghana in particular, given that we're already at a 98% electrification rate and we have overcapacity generation issues. I think that we need to go into renewable because there are several benefits that transcend just a general access rate. And the access rate that you referred to, I don't know if you have critically considered rural access rate. So if you're looking at rural electrification alone, we need to critically consider the solutions that can be quickly deployed to ensure that we're having that kind of access that we require, even at the rural level. That is one reason why solar energy or renewable energy in general comes in very handy. And you look at, when you compare the abundance of renewable energy in Africa in general and in Ghana in general, we'll be shooting ourselves in the foot if we're not taking advantage of renewable energy. Solar energy is widely available in Ghana, and we can easily deploy solar energy. If you compare the deployment rate of solar energy or any renewable, and you compare it to fossil fuel-based generation, the amount of time or the time overlay within which power plants, fossil-based power plants are deployed, you realize that we actually have an advantage if we are taking renewable energy into consideration. Another key reason why we must be motivated to look at renewable energy is the quick gains it provides in terms of being labor intensive, in terms of giving job creation, in terms of providing employment. All these things, and of course, we cannot forget about the environmental benefits. So we do have a motivation to go into renewable energy. We would be totally shooting ourselves in the foot if we do not take advantage of it. Thank you.
Okay, so first let's get the ones we agree about out of the way. Hydro is renewable, so it is renewable energy. It's just like Rim said, sometimes it's categorized as one of the traditional sources, so we don't look at it that way, but it is renewable, so that's out of the way. And the issue of mini hydros and different types of hydros. So first point, the power problem is not only a generation problem. In fact, a big aspect of the power problem is a transport problem. It is about bringing it to the place where it is needed, which is why we have in Ghana grid coal, and we know the problems we've had with grid coal. We have generation, we can't evacuate and send them to the right places. So that's one of the problems. If you have a hydro plant, it's going to be where the river is, and the people will be elsewhere. So that's one of the real issues we have to deal with. And then this issue about we have an overcapacity, and therefore, what is the motivation for doing what we are trying to do? Overcapacity technically is not just about generation capacity, it's about the cost of the energy. You don't have an overcapacity if you have an overcapacity in extremely expensive energy generation systems which are not affordable. And in this country, over what we call the energy crisis period, the doomsday period, we took the liberties, and when I say we, I mean our government, took the liberties to enter all kinds of power purchase agreements which didn't make sense. Now we are saddled with a lot of generation capacity we can't afford. To that extent, therefore, we don't have an overcapacity. You don't want that energy. So we need to figure out what to do with that thing. And again, that's why we are doing the thinking. Now, a bit about solar and maybe IMANI. We actually are not very romantic about renewable energy. In fact, there have been times when we have, I have debated against the use of renewable energy in certain situations simply because it does not give you the necessary energy to move people out of poverty. China puts in place over 100 megawatts of power every year in nuclear and fossil fuel and thermal and other sources because it has a need for effective energy, and it does not go into any argument about whether it's environmentally friendly or not. It is determined to pull people out of poverty, and it succeeded to a large extent. If you bring in these arguments of the environment and other things, then you are going to have a situation where fighting poverty takes longer. So I first want to make the point that we are not very romantic about renewable energy, thinking that everywhere should be, put under a solar system. We are saying this because if you take the pros and cons of renewable, and I'm talking about solar, wind, biomass, biogas, there is, in my mind, no reason why we are where we are. Let me give you a simple example. Secondary schools in this country average over 1,000 people per school. Anybody in biogas will tell you that when you have 1,000 people who go to toilet every day, it does not make sense not to have a biogas system delivering energy from that waste. Secondary schools today have roofs and almost zero solar panels. Meanwhile, the average classroom in this country needs only one bulb. And that one bulb means that you can double the use of that. It can be used day and night. That one bulb, in many cases, is one solar panel and a few accessories. I don't see why we have not put solar in every secondary school, put biogas in every secondary school. It is well known that bus systems, municipal transportation systems, can run on either electricity or gas. So I don't know why we haven't done that. My point is, if you look across the various things that we do, 40% of municipal energy use is lighting and other low intensity purposes, all of which can be put on solar. So the question is, why haven't we done that? If you want to use the other sources, it means you have to generate it, evacuate it, create all those situations, and then later go back and pay for it. So what we are simply putting out here, the issue is about the potential. And we think that the potential is well known. The question is, what are we going to do moving from here to really making sure that we put in place these energy systems, because we do need them. Okay, if you ask me for more hydro, first I'll ask you, where is the money to build the dam? And if you give me the money to build the dam, I assure you that money will be enough to produce more solar systems to deliver more power than the dam will produce. So it's a cost and benefit. It's a simple cost and benefit. Even if you have found oil, and you tell me, like we did in Ghana, we are going to have to borrow $4 billion to get the oil out and put it out. I'll ask you, do you know what $4 billion can do for wind energy and solar energy? Okay, so these are the decisions we have to make. Each one has a cost, and each one has a benefit. And I think that the more we think through it, we'll realize that we would apportion our resources a bit better to make sure that, especially the rural people who don't have the power that we need, okay, get it. And the issue about we have over 90% electricity penetration is not always true. You see, you can have the electricity pole running in front of your house, and you will not have power in the house. So there are stages to it. I am happy that it's available. But again, we need to move from it just being available to people actually using it. The average seamstress in Ghana can take care of their power needs using solar. And I think we must start thinking in that direction to see what is possible. Because there's cost everywhere, and we have to choose where we'll put it. Yes. So there are two on this table.
All right, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Idissa Sulemana. I'm an environmental economist. I teach at the University of Ghana Economics Department. The way I see this, Mr. Bentel, you when you were talking about China, you seem to want to downplay the implications of power generation for the environment. I want to say that environment is a very serious issue, so we can't just say it doesn't matter, let's go ahead and generate energy and get people out of poverty, because the environment can also cause poverty, really. Having said that, I like the example you gave about Germany, how they're trying to transition from hydro to solar and so forth. I'm pretty sure they have done all the cost-benefit analysis, all the feasibility studies, and they think that aside from being environmentally friendly, it's just better to have what? Solar. So I also support that we should be looking at solar more closely as an alternative to hydro. The reason is I feel one, hydro generation has a lot of implications for climate change, right? And we know climate change is already taking a toll on us. Even although we're emitting about 3% of the world's carbon dioxide emissions, Africa is beginning to suffer because of the effects of climate change on agricultural productivity. We're seeing less and less rains. We're seeing a lot of heating and so on and so forth, right? So we need to maybe look to hydro, because we can actually harness the abundant sunshine that we have. Now, what we all agree on is that solar tends to be very expensive around here. Think about what people do now these days, mechanized boreholes, right? You go to households in Accra, and people don't need water from Ghana Water Company anymore. Why can't we do that with solar? So that people can get off the national grid, so that there will be less pressure on the supply, so that we don't have to have what we had, the doomsday period and all that, right? Now, what does that mean? It's expensive because we have tariffs, and I don't know what the narrative is. Somewhere you see that there are no tariffs on solar panels, elsewhere you see there are tariffs. But the bottom line is that the batteries that have to store the energy that these panels bring are very expensive. There are huge tariffs on those. And
Try and wrap up, because we want to take some
calls
Okay,
that
try and wrap
we
up.
should reduce these tariffs. How is IMANI or any other person, aside from just individual businesses, walking that talk? Can we go to the government and say, look, let's try to do something, make it cheaper for people to actually install solar, so that they can leave the national electric grid? Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. Good morning. I wish the Ministry of Energy folks were here to address some of the issues that have been talked about. But let me just try and clarify a few issues. First and foremost, hydro is not as cheap as we are being made to understand. Bui is actually costing about 11 cents per kilowatt hour. Over a long period of time, yes, once you have taken care of the capacity charges, then the running O&M costs come, but Bui is 11 cents. Bui Power is also looking at some of the small hydro sites. In fact, they are about building a demonstration plant on the Chachadu River. For a 60 kilowatt plant, it's about $500,000. So if you do the unit cost, it's not cheap. Besides that, we don't seem to have a lot of hydro anymore. We've taken all the big hydro sites. Bui was the biggest of the lot. The rest, the maximum is around 90 megawatts maximum capacity. So yes, hydro has a place, but we seem to have exhausted all the big hydro sites. So the mini hydro sites and the small hydro sites, we mostly wouldn't be developed as grid-tied system. It has to be developed as standalone systems. So that's something that we all need to establish. The excess capacity, Kofi, unfortunately, is a big issue. It's a real big issue. We can't run away from that, and it's one of the main reasons. Yes, we've signed bad deals, but these contracts are take or pay. And any day that you don't run those plants, we will pay. So that's a serious issue. I'm sure yesterday, those of you who checked the graphic, Energy Commission is no longer issuing wholesale licenses for renewables, simply because they've already issued close to 130 licenses. Most of the projects haven't been developed. Why? Because there are no off-takers. And part of the reason, the only off-taker who has been forced to sign all the PPAs, ECG, is not creditworthy. And come January 1, ECG ceases to be the ECG that everybody can force to sign a PPA. Because the Miracle people will take over and they wouldn't just sign any PPA. So there are a lot of issues, and unfortunately the excess capacity is a big issue. Until we're able to find demand for the close to additional 2,000 megawatts that is almost redundant at this stage, it's a big issue. Solar has its own issues. Solar is very competitive these days, especially the grid-connected systems. But solar is going to also create some problems that we haven't perhaps looked at yet. For example, Bui is doing about 20 megawatts. in phases. The 20 megawatt, they need about 10,000 acres of land. 10,000 acres. So very soon there will be serious competition for land. The roofs that we are looking at, the Association of Solar Industry people will tell you that most of our routes have not been built to take the loads that we would like to do. The hairdressers, their salons can't take the load that will meet their demands in there. So put everything put together, we need a proper plan. And each of the technologies will have a role. Okay, the government said they want to do 10%. 10% of what we're not too sure. But assuming it's 10% of total installed capacity, at the moment we are about 4,200 megawatts. So it means we're talking about 400 megawatts. At the moment, renewables minus the large hydros is about 20 megawatts out of the total. So there's still room for the renewables. But all these technologies, unfortunately, are also not that cheap. I mean, the wind project happening at around Pram Pram for about 125 megawatts, we're talking about $320 million US. Of course, you don't worry about recurring costs, but the capital costs will have to be recovered. So let's make sure that we don't just, let's make sure that it's a holistic plan. We are looking at it in totality. Each of the technologies will have a role to play. Finally, access. I think access, even the ministry people are quoting, nationwide is about 85%. But rural access is around 65%. So we still have a long way to go. And the places where they don't have access now are the places that are difficult to reach. Okay, so even within the ministry, even though they are talking about universal access, they concede that for some of them, they can't extend the grid. That's where the off-grid solutions and the mini-grids also will have a critical role to play. Bottom line, we need a plan that will create and carve out a place for each of the options that we have on the table. Otherwise, we'll be saddled with a very expensive technologies. Very soon in this country, we may be forced to turn off efficient combined cycle plants and run simple cycle plants because of take-or-pay contracts. And that doesn't make sense.
Ben, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kofi. I mean, the question really is, does renewable provide a potential for energy for Africa? And the answer I will give is yes. We have talked about the solar, other renewable forms that are available to us that can help us generate electricity in Africa. But the problem you always find, and probably the politicians are the ones who can answer it better, is that we look at the potential we have, and we only see ourselves as the market where we can import the technology, to use. And that is a major problem. If you have potential for solar, you're not only looking to buying panels, you have to be part of the evolution in terms of technology. How do you develop a more efficient technology that can, for example, Ishmael mentioned that our roofs are not designed in a way that can actually harness enough solar potential. How can research help deal with that? Those are the questions we have to answer. If we are not thinking about the critical solutions and how we approach the adoption of technology, we will not be able to solve the problems, and we'll keep going back in circles. If you look at the renewable energy plan, the strategic energy plan, the SNEP, that Energy Commission developed, they identified that for Ghana, biomass presents a huge potential. If you look at timber, the timber waste, when we cut the log, all the branches go to waste, and we set them ablaze in the bushes. And that is enough potential to generate so much electricity. But we just use them for charcoal burning. We cut a lot of wood to convert it into charcoal, and we export some and we consume some. The energy that we waste for burning it into charcoal can even electrify the whole of Ghana. So who is thinking through that to ensure that we are not just talking, but we are engaging academia, we're engaging our research students for them to be relevant in this conversation so that we can harness our renewable energy more efficiently. Else we'll always be importing technology, and we don't get the real solutions that we want. As far as energy is concerned, 1 kilowatt from solar, renewable, solar, hydro, nuclear is the same kilowatt. Okay, so we have to think about our context. For example, I mean, I've seen a project in Brongahafo where a company was given a concession, a land, and a permit to go ahead to build a biomass plant. And they have over 100,000 hectares of plantation now, which they could cut and burn it to generate electricity. What the politician is looking at is that the cost of generating from that plant is about 19 cents per kilowatt hour. They rather prefer 11 cents per kilowatt hour and spend $1 to import heavy fuel oil, to use in those plants, rather than the biomass plant that is for 60 megawatt plant, employing about 2,000 Ghanaians, who for the first time didn't even have bank accounts, and now they have bank accounts receiving salaries. So you see how we are thinking. We think short term, we think importing fuel and not making use of what we have, that can generate, higher economic rate of return in the long run. So proper thinking is what is really needed to harness the energies that we have. We have significant renewable potential that if we would think through and, apply research, we will be able to solve our problems without looking at importing.
Mr. Nyante, yes, I'll give you the last word because he's really in that industry. So I just want you to, make your point and then we'll wrap it up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bento. So there are a number of issues here. Is there potential for renewable energy in Africa? Africa is made up of a number of countries, and each country has its own unique situation. So let's focus on Ghana. In Ghana, this party in power campaigned on the promise of making sure that there is solar energy in all schools, all hospitals, all military bases, all police depot, all district assemblies. And came into power and realized that there has been a number of PPAs signed. And so if they were going to make sure that they were honoring those PPAs or rearranging them, it would cause some kind of delay in bringing in renewable energy. But Mr. Bento, you made some excellent points. Whenever you generate electricity, you have to think of some other things. Number one is transportation of the energy, and then number two is the distribution. When it comes to the problem or the challenge of distribution, we are not going to be able to easily solve our challenge of distribution. So let's say you get electricity to East Legon. How do you make sure it goes to every house? You have transformers and all those other poles that you have to have. Those challenges that cause the power to go out an hour or sometimes 10 hours a day are not going to be easy to solve. The bottom line is that we cannot make any argument that we have signed a number of PPAs or we have overcapacity of energy, so we are not going to focus on distributed energy. That brings me to what are the challenges facing distributed energy? What will it take for a household or a factory to run out of solar energy? The challenge is with two things. Number one is with project development on the SME side, and number two is with finance. So even you take countries like US, one of the companies that made renewable energy sexy is Solar City. The only thing that Solar City did was to make sure that there are payment options for homeowners to be able to pay for solar energy or factories to pay for energy. So the argument that renewable energy is expensive is not really true. It is because nobody will ask you to pay for your electricity for 5 years upfront. But when you buy solar energy, essentially we are asking you to pay for energy generation 5 years upfront. Is there a mechanism that will help us to be able to spread the payments over time for homeowners or even the industries to be able to pay for it? Those are some of the things that we need to focus on. And when you say that there are no off-takers, you made a very good point there. It is not necessarily true that there are no off-takers. The issue with off-takers is how do we develop the projects? How does one go around and say, government is doing one village, one dam, I'm going to put about 10 dams together, they're going to use some kind of irrigation system, I've created a project which is worth $1 million US, and I can get a financier for it. And what kind of finance are we going to look for? Because it has to be low interest to be able to beat prices of the electricity company for somebody to migrate to solar energy. So as of now, even in the US, where a kilowatt hour of electricity is 10 cents to $10 cents, renewable energy is introduced to reduce it to $8 cents or $7 cents. In Ghana, even residential is, after reduction in the cost of electricity, is still paying $20 cents. The reason why the banks, the reason why there is lack of availability of finance for homeowners or factories to make monthly payment is because the banks have not taken a real interest in renewable energy to create financial institutions. I've been working on this for the past 3 years, and I finally concluded it is easier for a solar energy company to take on the issue of solving the financial problem than to rely on the banks. The banks make money lending at 25% on the city, 30% on the city. They don't have time to create a project around making sure that the homeowner is paying less than 10% on the city for renewable energy. The idea that we don't have space for renewable energy is not true. You know, there are solutions where you can put renewable energy on water. So there are floating solar energy systems. Even in the homes, a lot of the ideas that are coming out are solar carports. That is, you build a car garage and the roof is solar energy. And some of the solar energy panels are interlocking, so it gives you the feel of a real roof. For instance, I advocate that almost all these new factories, if there is one factory, one district, one factory, almost all these factories should use solar energy roofing. If it's the same cost, the money that you're going to use to do a roof, you can use that money to do solar energy roofing, which means that the factory has base load energy. So what is the conclusion? The conclusion is that, number one, we need to focus heavily on advocacy to get government to become interested in pushing renewable energy. We need to advocate and make sure that we are pushing the hand of government to take renewable energy seriously. Right. Number two, we need policy around off-taker. There are countries like Kenya that make sure that if you are using hot water tank of a certain capacity, it has to be solar energy. So once you create the market, the projects will follow and the finance will follow. So we need policy around, let's say 10% of all the energy in hotels or hospitals should come from renewable energy. You'd have created a market for renewable energy and you'd have created the projects, and then the finance will follow. If we do these things, we advocate and we create the market for it, then the projects will follow, and then we'll be able to get financial solutions to make sure that we can pay in bits for solar energy or wind or whatever form of energy. And by doing that, you would have also created a large market for off-takers.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nyante. So a lot has been said. It's just unfortunate all the time we have to kind of, shut the issues before we are all satisfied with the deliberations. But at IMANI and at OCP, what we are trying to do is to elevate the conversation, to bring it to the fore and start, really beating the issues till somebody feels like they really have to get up and do something about it. In the past week, I have actually been together with the ministry people and also the Energy Commission, and I can tell you this to Mr. Nyante and everybody, the policies are there. The next thing we need to do is to make sure they are effective in creating the market that Mr. Nyante is talking about. Now, like I said, it's the start of a discussion. We are elevating it and we hope it to go on. What are some of the things that we are going to take out of here in your subsequent, deliberation and discussion on these issues. First thing is this: we do have an energy crisis in Ghana and Africa, but specifically Ghana. And we can deal with at least 40% of our energy needs from renewable sources. That's a takeaway. Now, on the cost of renewable, it's been said here, many persons have said it. It is not more expensive than the traditional courses, including hydro. Maybe the next time we meet, we'll go through the figures and you understand, but the fact is clear. More than one person has said it. Hydro is not the cheapest. Indeed, renewables in a certain arrangement can far more than beat hydro in terms of cost. Now, grid power, that is centralized power, is not the only option. Indeed, it's one of the inefficient options. Because if you have, decentralized systems, the solar system on your roof doesn't need a grid. If it's working, it's always going to work. So we need to put that in our mind. It is true that there's government policy, but now we need them to move from just the policy to become more effective. That would take a bit more work. Mr. Nyante is talking about project management approach and financing, which is the heart of the problem. It would take more serious attention to this particular sector so that we can actually get things moving in that area. Indeed, we don't have a choice. We cannot solve all our energy problems using the traditional sources. We need to give renewables, solar, wind, biomass, and all those others a very, very serious look. And I hope that this discussion will continue. Thank you very, very much, ladies and gentlemen. I think I'll hand over for the next session.